Hello students, and welcome to the video for the review of compound inequalities. So remember, compound inequalities is basically when you have two inequalities in the same problem. They come in two different varieties. You've got your and problems, which will either say the word and or they'll look like this, where you got the two combined. And when you see that, you know that your graph is going to meet in the middle. Okay? So they're going to be a closed interval. There's no infinities with the and problems. The other type of problem you're going to see are the or types. Or types will always go the opposite directions. Okay? So if you were to graph the ors, they'll go opposite directions. Kind of like that. Now, or will always say or. So if it says or, it's an or problem. There's nothing different about that. Okay. And then otherwise, it's all the same normal inequality stuff. You would have your open circles, closed circles. If it eats the variable, it goes to the right. If it eats the number, it goes to the left. And you would also have, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, it's going to flip your inequality sign. Okay, let's go through and do some examples. Now, like I just said, this is going to be an and problem. So before you even start with problems like this, you guys should separate them. So when we separate these, the entire middle goes to both sides. Okay, what I usually do is I tell my students to cover up one of the inequalities, and that's one of the inequality symbols and everything behind it. And that's one of your inequalities. So 1 is greater than n over 7. And then we cover up the other one. And n over 7 is greater than negative 1. n over 7 is greater than negative 1. And then to solve them, we would just multiply each side by 7. Okay, not too tough. This is just a simple one-step compound inequality. We get 7 is greater than n, and we get n is greater than negative 7. Okay, so there's your solved inequalities. That's half your answer there. Then we need our graph. And we've got it at negative 7 and 7. Since they're the regular inequality symbols, you'd use an open circle. So open circles, and it's greater or it's less than 7, so it's going to go to the left. It's greater than negative 7, so it's going to go to the right. These meet in the middle, just like the and problem should, which would give you, for the interval notation, the least number is negative 7, greatest number is positive 7, and they both have parentheses because they're both at open circles. So that would be your interval notation. Let's look at another one. So this one says or, which tells me right off the bat that it is going to be a going opposite direction type of problem. So to solve these, again, you just kind of solve each side individually. They're two separate inequalities. So on this one, you add 8 to each side, which will give you x is greater than 10. On this one, you multiply each side by 3. 0 times 3 is still 0, so x is less than 0. So there's our solved inequalities. Then we would graph them. That's a very crooked graph. Sorry. Okay, there's my number line. I've got a number at 0 and a 10. And these are both going to be open circles again. So they don't have the line underneath it's not equal to. And they're going to go opposite directions. It's less than 0 and it's greater than 10. Okay, so there's your graph, and then the interval notation, the least number, and you have to do this in order. It has to go from left to right, because we read from left to right. We don't read 10 infinity and then come back and do this first one. That's not how we read things. So that has to be in order where it is wrong. Okay, so the first interval, the least number is negative infinity. The greatest number would be 0. They would both have parentheses. Then, to show that they're part of the same problem, we put a capital U, stands for union, and then we do the same thing with 10 and infinity, parenthesis, and that would be your interval notation for that one. So that would be your answers right there. Okay, Let's look at another one. This was going to be another one-stepper. So looking at number 3 here. Again, it's an or, so right off the bat I know they're going to go opposite directions. So just solve them individually. Going to add 3 on the right, on the left here. That gives you x is greater than or equal to 8. And then you multiply each side by 10. And that's going to give you x is less than negative 10. So then when we graph it, negative 10 and 8. Negative 10 is going to have an open circle because this has that regular inequality symbol. But the 8 is going to have a closed circle right there. It is greater than 8, so it's going to go to the right. It is less than negative 10, so it's going to go to the left. And that would be your graph. And then your interval notation, same idea as the last problem. It would be negative infinity and negative 10 in parentheses and then a capital U and then a bracket, because it's a closed circle, right? Bracket 8 and then infinity parenthesis. Okay, not too bad so far. Do one more one-stepper here. So this one's combined, so it's going to be an and problem, right? And the first thing we do is we flip it, or not flip it, split it. So we would split it into 2 inequalities. So 9 is less than or equal to negative 3x, and negative 3x is less than 24. Okay, and then to solve these, we just divide by negative 3. And we're dividing by a negative, sorry. We're dividing by a negative number, which means that inequality sign needs to flip, needs to change directions. Anytime you divide by a negative number, it changes directions. So that's going to become a negative 3 is now greater than x, and x is now greater than negative 8. So then we graph it. Negative 8 would come first. Learn how to write an 8. And then negative 3. And negative 3 is going to have a closed circle. Negative 8 is going to have an open circle. And it's less than negative 3. It's greater than 8. Those meet in the middle. Okay, and then the last thing we do is our interval notation. So least number is negative 8. Greatest number is negative 3. Be parenthesis on negative 8 and a bracket on negative 3. And that would be your answers. Okay, not too tough so far, right? Let's do some more. Sorry, this is going to be a little bit of a longer video. I'll probably just do the whole review here because it's only 10 problems. So again, we're going to split it since it's combined. Split it into 2 different inequalities. So 39 is greater than 9 minus 6p. And this is going to be an and problem because it's combined. And 9 minus 6p is greater than or equal to negative 9. Now, a common mistake when we split it, is when we have multiple terms here, is a lot of students try to like cut it right down the middle. That's not right. That entire middle needs to go to both of the new inequalities. And it's when you skip this step that you usually get things wrong. So do not skip splitting the inequality. I know it takes like 2 extra seconds to write it again, but trust me, it's going to make you more accurate and you'll thank me for it later. So to solve these are 2-steppers, right? Got an acquaintance, best friend. We're going to minus the 9 first. Gives you 30 is greater than negative 6p. And then you divide by negative 6. Which is going to flip the inequality sign, and you're going to get negative 5 is less than p. Same idea on this side. You minus the 9 first, which gives you negative 6p is greater than or equal to negative 18. Divide by negative 6, and it flips the sign, and p is now less than or equal to positive 3. Okay, then we do our graph. At negative 5 and positive 3. Negative 5 is going to be an open circle. Positive 3 is going to be a closed circle. And it's less than 3, greater than negative 5. They're going to meet in the middle. And then the last step is our interval notation. Least number is negative 5. Greatest is 3. 3 has a bracket. negative 5 out of parentheses, and that would be your answers. Okay, not too tough, right? This one's an or, so right off the bat, I know it's going to go opposite directions. So solve them individually. This side you would add 2 to each side, gives you negative 10x greater than or equal to 0. Divide by negative 10, and nothing divided by 10 is still nothing, but it's negative, so it's going to flip the sign, and x is going to be less than or equal to 0. So there's one answer. Then we do solve the second one here. Again, best friend acquaintance, going to move the 4 first, so we'd add 4 to each side. Gives you 2x is greater than or equal to 6. And then divide by 2. And x is greater than or equal to 3. So when we graph it, we add 0 and 3. They both have closed circles. It's less than 0, so it's going to the left. It's greater than 3, so it's going to the right. Go in opposite directions there. And then in our interval notation, it'd be negative infinity, comma 0, parenthesis on the infinity, bracket on the 0. Infinities always have a parenthesis, right? And then a capital U, and then a bracket, 3, comma infinity. Okay. Just a few more here, guys. Stay with me. Don't tune me out yet. Okay. Number 8. These are where we get into the multi-step. We got variables on both sides, all that fun stuff. Again, just like the problem above it here, the first thing you want to do is split this when it's combined like this. Split it into 2 different problems. So 10v minus 8 is less than negative 2 plus 8v. And negative 2 plus 8v is less than 10 plus 10v. Okay. Then the first step with multi-steps like this is you want to move the variable to one side. Distribute, combine like terms, move the variable, but nothing to distribute, no like terms. So we're going to move the variable. I always like to move the variable that would make it so that the variable remains positive, so you don't have to worry about flipping any signs. But it doesn't really matter which one you move because you're going to end up with the same answer either way. But if I move the 10 to this side, then I'd end up with a negative 2, and I would have to flip the sign. So if I move the 8 by subtracting, right? Because if you want to move the entire term, it's just to add or subtract. So we minus 8v, that'd give you 2v minus 8, it's less than negative 2. Then I'd add 8, that gives me 2v is less than 6, divide by 2, v is going to be less than 3. So that's one answer. And then same idea over here, we're going to move the 8v, because it's the smaller one, and I'll keep it positive. And that's going to give me negative 2 is less than 10 plus 2v, and then I'd minus the 10 to each side. That gives me negative 12 is less than 2v, divide by 2. You get negative 6 is less than v. Okay, then we would graph it. So negative 6 and 3. These are both going to be open circles. And it's less than 3, so it's going to the left. It's greater than 6. Those mean the middle. And then our interval notation would be negative 6 and 3, both in parentheses. So just like that. Okay. Then our last problem here before we get to the story problems. This one is an OR problem, so it's going to go opposite directions. Don't need to worry about splitting, just need to get things to the one side. So this one, this is a negative 2n, so I'm going to add it to the other side so I can keep things positive. So add 2n gives me 4n minus 5 greater than or equal to 7. Then I would add 5 to each side, gives me 4n greater than or equal to 12, and then divide by 4, and I get n is greater than or equal to 3. So there's one answer. Then this side, I'm going to move the 2 so that can stay a positive number. So minus 2n would give me 6n plus 9 is less than or equal to 3. Then I'd minus the 9, gives me 6n. It's less than or equal to negative 6. Divide by 6, and I get n is less than or equal to negative 1. So there's my 2 solved inequalities, and I'm going to graph it. So negative 1 and 3 They both have closed circles, and they're going to go opposite directions. Okay, greater than 3, less than -1. And then the interval notation would be negative infinity with a parenthesis, and then -1, bracket, capital U, bracket, 3, infinity, parenthesis. Okay, still not too bad, right? 3 steps and you solved each of those inequalities. Okay, story problems. So story problems, this is going to be your 4-level question on your test. We want you guys to graph them and solve them and all that kind of fun stuff, do the interval notation. So when we look at these, number 9, a bucket of Takis costs $29.88 online. What is the maximum number of buckets you can buy there with $100? So I'm trying to figure out the number of buckets I can buy. So X is the number of buckets of Takis. And my light just went out, so it's scary movie time. Let me get the lights back on here. Come on, lights. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, the classroom lights turn off if you don't move. And yeah, welcome to my life. Okay, so X is the buckets of Takis. Depending on the number of buckets I buy, it's going to be 29.88 per bucket, right? So if I do 29.88 times the number of buckets I buy, it needs to be something in relation to $100. So I want to figure out what the maximum number of buckets I can buy with $100. So can I buy more than $100? No. Can I buy all the buckets that I need with can I buy all the buckets I can with $100? Yeah, I can, but can I buy less? Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to say, and I'm rambling, I know, is that the $100 needs to be the bigger number, right? Because you don't have more than $100. So this side needs to be less than this side. So the alligator is going to eat that side. Can I spend exactly $100? Yeah. So I'm going to have a inequality sign there with an equal to. Then to solve this, I just have to divide by 29.88 to each side. 29.88, so 100 divided by 29.88, and I get 3.34, blah, 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 blah. Now, I could write that down. X has to be less than or equal to 3.3, blah, 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 blah. But wouldn't it be more accurate to say X is less than or equal to 3? Because can you buy 0.3 blah, blah, blah of a bucket? No, it's going to be sold in just buckets, right? So this would be the more accurate way of doing it. I know like on our quizzes, we usually allow for the decimal answers as well, but this is the more accurate answer right here. So X is less than 3, so we would graph it. So at 3, we'd have a closed circle, and it would go to the left. And I know real world, you don't buy negative buckets of Takis, right? But to keep things simple and consistent with you guys, our interval notation is going to be what you would normally think it would be. So negative infinity, and then 3, bracket. Okay? And that would be your answers right there. Okay, let's try the last problem. And this is going to be something you will probably most likely see on your test. So just be aware. If you can do these, then you can do everything on your test. So admission to a fun park is $4. That's a one-time fee, right? You plan on spending $10 for lunch. That's another one-time fee. And $3.50 for a snack. That's another one-time fee. Each ride is $2. Anytime you see the word each or per or every, those are keywords that tell you that the number it's about to talk to is going to be multiplying with what is most likely your variable. Okay? So keep an eye out for those words. Each, per, every, those type of things. You want to spend at most $35. So if I want to spend at most $35, would I spend $40? No. Would I spend $20? I mean, that's okay. Could I spend exactly 35? Yeah. So anything 35 or less is what I want to finally get here. So I usually start when I have a problem like this. I start with setting up my variable. X is going to represent the number of rides I can go on, right? That's what I don't know. That's what it wants me to find out. I know that each ride is $2. So depending on the number of rides I go on, it would be an additional $2. So that would be 2 times X. But I also know I'm going to spend $4 to get in. I know I'm going to spend another $10 for lunch. I know I'm going to spend another $3.50 for a snack. And I know that I want that all to be less than or equal to $35. Okay, so that's how you would set up the inequality. And then we can combine all these, right? 2x plus 4 plus 10 is 14, 17.5. Has to be less than or equal to 35. So then it's just a two-step inequality, minus 17.5 to each side. That gives you 2x is less than or equal to 17.5. And then the last step here is we're going to divide by 2. And 17.5 divided by 2 is 8.75. Now, can you go on 0.75 of a ride? No, they usually don't let you go on 3/4 of a ride. So the more accurate answer here would be you'd want to go on 8 rides or less, right? That would be the more accurate answer. And then when you graph it, you got a closed circle, it's going to go to the left, and the interval notation would be negative infinity and 8 with a bracket, parenthesis. So it would look like that. Okay? If you have any questions, let your teachers know. We're here to help. We want to help, and I'll see you guys out there.